So, hi again. My name is Melissa Lee. I'm the founder and CEO of the Green Program. We're so excited to have you all joining us today, tomorrow, yesterday, this whole week. Our team has put together an amazing panel series of pretty incredible speakers and Green Program alumni who represent the future, the current state, and the future of what energy and sustainability is going to be all about. If this is your first time knowing and hearing about the Green Program, we create short-term programs abroad that are accredited courses, all focused on sustainable development. So we bring students and universities to get access into everything from Iceland's largest geothermal power plants to Fukushima's disaster zones, suiting up and going to the nuclear facilities. We like to say if you basically take Nat Geo, smash it together with Vice in a 10-day educational, raw, unfiltered experience, that's what you get with the Green Program. And again, we're here. You can see our amazing panelists, hopefully on your screens right now. And you're tuning in now for the Future of Energy panel for Green Programs Mobilizing Change panel series for Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, everybody. Before we get started, I do want to go through a few housekeeping just for how to use this if this is your first time on Zoom. On the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a chat bar. We want to put this chat bar to work today. What we're going to do is encourage everybody to join the conversation. So every question that I will be posing to the panelists, that's an invitation for all of you to also answer and give feedback to. So we want to see your thoughts and hope that you use this space to connect with one another as well. We also have some polls that we'll launch today that you'll see pop up on your screen. Take a quick second and answer those questions as they come through. But you guys can start introducing yourselves in that chat bar, and we want to know if you're a student, where you're coming from, what you're studying, why you're here, and what you're interested in taking away today with us. And before we introduce the panelists, I do want to give some context to Earth Day today. Not only is it Earth Day, it is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So if we go back to April 22nd, 1970, what that looked like was probably a lot of polluted rivers that were catching on fire, lots of smog, no voice or justice really for our environment and the people who were living in those situations with a dirty environment. So 20 million Americans, which was 10% of the American population at the time, took to the streets, united, and said, we need to do better. And from that, we've progressed, and the things that we know today, like the Clean Air Act, the Endangered Species Act, and even the EPA, were born from that movement. The theme for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day is climate action. And what Green Program is here to do is to provide a space and a really dynamic conversation. And our goal through this Mobilizing Change series is for you all to be able to walk away with one thing that anybody can do to be a part of the solution for sustainable development. So again, without further ado, let's get started. I'm so excited to introduce our panelists. Why don't we start with Hannah? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, my name's Hannah Capshaw. I work at Independent Power Systems based in Boulder, Colorado. I'm the solar and storage consultant for our northeast branch, primarily the Boston area. So I work on all of our projects there. I'm also brought in for some special projects we do kind of around the world. For microgrid solar and storage. We also have a branch in Colorado and Montana, and I help out with some of our Colorado projects as well. I got involved with the Green Program in 2015. I did the Iceland program while I was at Baylor for undergrad, and it really started my career. So I'm a huge advocate for the Green Program.
Thanks, Hannah. Jimmy, headed over to you.
Yeah, I'm Jim Riley. I'm an electrical engineer working at the National Renewable Energy Lab on microgrids and some wind controls research. I participated in the Green Program in Costa Rica in 2012 as a student, and then went back in spring of 2013 as a counselor. And most of my focus for the last 6 or 8 years has been working with the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy on large-scale renewable energy projects and like large generator interconnection with utilities or with the military bases electrical distribution system. And and wind research through the Department of Energy.
Thanks, Jimmy. Great to have you back. Jimmy was just on our panel yesterday for Engineering for the Environment, so he's back with some more perspective for you all. Up next, we'll introduce Zach.
Hey everyone, I'm Zach. I attended the Green program in Peru when I was a freshman at the University of Oregon in 2015. Totally changed my life and set my career path forward. Since the University of Oregon, I've been working at Momentum here in Sacramento. We also have an office in Oakland, California. And we are a consulting firm for pre-commercial clean tech startups working in electric vehicles, bioenergy, general grid management, and specifically with clean tech entrepreneurs. Core of our work is grant writing, but we do a lot of strategy consulting for helping entrepreneurs go from the pre-commercial phase to the market. And yeah.
Awesome, Zach, thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Miriam as well.
Hi, hello everyone. Happy Earth Day. My name is Miriam Hagelin. I was with the Green program as well in 2012 in Costa Rica. It's a really great experience. I especially enjoyed all the hands-on and the opportunity to go into the field and really see firsthand what's going on in the energy industry, and that definitely led my career path. I graduated with a civil engineering degree from Carnegie Mellon University and then a master's degree in environmental engineering. For the last 4 years, I've been working at ExxonMobil. So I started off as an environmental engineer working on our offshore platforms in the Gulf of Mexico, and then also some of our onshore facilities in the United States. And then recently I've switched into a business planning role for our LNG projects. So excited about this discussion today and what the energy industry is going to look like, and to get everyone else's perspective as well.
I love it. So this is what this is all about. It wouldn't be a proper panel without every perspective involved, or at least a lot of the perspectives involved in what the topic of the future of energy, or just energy itself. So that's what we're here to do today. And the first question, again, that I will pose to the audience as well as the panelists is, this is actually an agree-disagree statement, which I don't want to mess up, so I'm trying to look for the exact wording. The statement is, it is 100% possible that we can live in a clean energy world right now. I'll give you a second. So we can live in a 100% clean energy world right now, is the agree or disagree statement. So jump into that chat box, start writing your thoughts. It's agree or disagree and your why, and let's start having this conversation. So we're gonna start this conversation off with Jimmy. What are your thoughts on this?
I'd say disagree just because it says right now. I think we're moving in the right direction and taking all of the right steps, taking some of the right steps. We can always do more. But we're also doing a pretty good job right now because of the global shutdowns due to the coronavirus pandemic. You can finally see the Himalayas from certain cities in India, which is pretty great. But I think we're taking steps in the right direction with renewable portfolio standards and stuff, and all the great work that everybody on this chat is working on will help us get there.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. Zach, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to punt this to the engineers on the panel, but from my understanding, I think the technology to produce the energy is there. We have some issues with figuring out transmission and getting the resources spread out efficiently, but I guess my quick and short would be, I think we could. There's just a whole lot of political friction, and actually getting the energy to where it needs to be is a tough part.
Great, thanks, Zach. Hannah?
Yeah, I have to disagree as well. And I think we have to keep pushing for more financial incentives and the development of clean tech, just so that we can be more competitive with fossil fuels. And, you know, that's really just getting more attention to renewables. We've unfortunately inherited a world that's really entrenched with the use of fossil fuels. So derailing that train would really not be good for any one of us. So we just have to get creative and transform these systems, which just starts with creating more common sense financial incentives and low cost production to just get more competitive.
Great, thank you. Miriam?
Sure, just to add on, I also disagree. I don't think to sustain sort of the standard of living we have right now, and then what the future demand of energy is going to be like, especially in developing nations that might not have the same resources that the U.S. has. I think it's going to be very challenging to get there.
Great. I will also add, so this is a topic that comes up on our programs a lot. And I think when you look at the technology of looking at solar power, and if we, for example, there's a statistic and study out there somewhere of being able to place solar specifically on a very small percentage of the planet could actually power the world with that. So that takes everything else out of consideration in terms of the realistic factors that you all are bringing up here too. So I appreciate everyone's perspective here. I think there's certain elements that are lining up nicely to progress towards a future this way, but we have a lot of work to do. And I think that's what I just took away from what you all were saying. But on that note, I can jump to that next question of, what does the future of energy look like to each of you in an ideal world? And then on the other side, what does that actually look like right now for you in a realistic world? And can they be the same? So ideal world, realistic world, and can they be the same? Miriam, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think that when we look at the energy industry, we sort of have to look at the long-term supply and demand, as with any commodity. I think maybe right now there's some short-term volatility going on, but if we look at the long-term demand of energy, I think we'll see a lot of increase, particularly in countries that are still developing their economies and developing their population. So the question is then going to be, well, how can we meet the supply? What kind of supply are we going to use in order to meet that demand? And I think realistically right now, it's really going to be a unique solution to each region of the world. Each country is going to have their own natural resources, their own level of development, their own investment abilities, different geopolitical risks involved, different economies involved as well. In general, I think we'll see places like maybe India and Southeast Asia continue to use coal because that's what they have and it's cheap, and they're trying to get electricity. A lot of their people right now, that's their main priority. Places like China, I think huge economic growth. They'll probably go into every kind of energy mix, renewables and natural gas. Places like Europe, though, might be better equipped. They're probably at a level in development right now where they can sustain their current trend. So they'll switch more to renewable energies. They've sort of been a leader in that space. Africa as well, I think they have a lot of natural gas resources. They'll probably develop first just because that's what they have, and that's the cheapest option in order to sustain build their economy. And then in the US, I think as well with the shale gas that we have now, we'll probably use that first to replace a lot of the coal power plants and then probably switch to renewables later on. So I think that's sort of a realistic energy outlook. There's different agencies and organizations that publish 30, 40-year outlooks that you can look on. I think that's the general trends. Ideally, maybe we can overcome a lot of the technology and regulatory hurdles that we've just talked about. But I think that's all going to take time. And I think it's important to realize really what's the priority of each country and where they're going to focus their resources in the next couple of years.
Great. And I'll let any other panelists jump in as well with thoughts.
I'll jump in then. So the ideal world, right? Of course, it looks like a ton of renewables deployed across the world, energy storage. Like, I think Siemens developed something that was like a transcontinental DC transmission, like power transmission line, things like that. But that's very far down the road. So how do you align that with reality? It's sort of a phased approach. And it's like Miriam had mentioned, like, what resources do you have at hand and what sort of infrastructure is currently deployed, and figuring out what the steps are you need to take to get there. And we've gone through like the technology. A lot of folks in the chat thread are saying the technology is there, right? Like solar PV, inverters, wind turbines, energy storage. Like we've sort of gotten to that point, and now we're working through the cost reduction side. PV panels are very cheap. The inverters are still sort of the brute force of the cost behind there. So now we're working on cost and actual like deployment of those systems. At NREL, I should know the numbers for wind and solar that are deployed, but they're 10, 20%. Someone else might know better than me. That's terrible as me being at NREL. But at deployment, And we're also working through the process of what is the impact of putting those onto the system. What are the considerations and challenges, and like good engineers and like critical thinkers that we all are, how do you address those challenges and then move to the next step? And there's some studies out there, Western Wind and Solar and the Eastern Renewable Generation Integration Study. Those look at the United States Western and Eastern interconnect, that how much wind and solar can you put until there's some threshold, and then what do you need to change, and refinement. But I think the point, another point that was in the chat thread was around politics, and politics does play a large role, but just because maybe you don't push the argument that let's do renewables because they're clean. Let's do renewables because they make economic sense now. And that's sort of what's starting to happen in most places. And that's why we're all pretty well employed in the renewable space, even in the political climate that we live in right now.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. Zach, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think when we look at an ideal energy system of the future, maybe specifically here in the United States, I used to intern at a clean tech venture capital firm, and there was 4 Ds that they call the trends of the energy system that we want to create. That's 1, decarbonization, 2, decentralization, 3, democratization, more people-owned power, and then 4, digitalized. So how can we use AI, big data, and smart grids to make sure that resources are being distributed efficiently and where they need to be. So I guess those are my 4 trends for looking at how we create the energy system of the future that we want. Realistically, right now, it just depends who we vote in, how do we create the story around renewables, of economic success they can create, the cleaner world we can live in, and yeah.
Great, thank you. And Hannah?
Yeah, I have to agree with Zach as well. I probably won't put it as eloquently, but I think, yeah, in an ideal world, renewables are the cheapest source of energy. We have no need for energy technology that has harmful effects. There's also no political roadblocks in an ideal world, which is unfortunately the case. Like it's been brought up, the technology is there, but we just need to create a higher demand. And since it's Earth Day, I want to focus on like what we can do. And I think what all of these people here are doing, and what probably all of the audience is doing, is that we're changing the industry from the inside out. Our generation is super unique. We're the 2nd largest and most educated generation in history. And, you know, there's a lot of things that make our generation a lot different. Women and people of color, we've never been more equal or had more opportunities. And the good news is we're also the most environmentally conscious generation to ever exist. And we're getting into these companies, our voices are getting louder, our impact is growing. We're moving higher and higher up. So I just think that's how sustainable change is made. And we have to just infiltrate these companies that are doing things the old way and shift business norms and minimize externalities the best we can and operate sustainably.
Hannah, you use one of the best words that I describe maybe alumni like Miriam that comes to mind, because there are, I won't say many, there's a handful of the Miriams in our world in terms of, sure, on paper we see ExxonMobil and we see oil and gas. And I'm just gonna, address that elephant that's in the room and in the chat bar right now. And what's important for us.
Look.
Yeah. What's important to us is that, one, it would be irresponsible for us to not include oil and gas in conversations like this when we're talking about major stakeholders in the future of energy. And then number 2, so many of our alumni, I will let you answer this yourself, Miriam, but I will say the alumni that we've talked to, they call me Melissa, I'm infiltrating. We need to have some kind of bridge of being able to say, okay, what are these existing worlds that need to maybe adapt a little bit more, a lot more, right? So Miriam, maybe like if you can touch a little bit more on your experience so far with taking your knowledge for sustainable development, your passions for environmental engineering as well, and then how you've been able to fuse that into the world at Exxon or oil and gas specifically.
Definitely. I think something that maybe I'll share with everyone here today and all those students on the line is definitely push yourself and go outside your comfort zone, and you'll gain so much more if you interact with people from different viewpoints and push yourself. I graduated and then I went straight away to an offshore oil and gas platform, a 22-year-old girl from New York with an environmental engineering degree. And everyone else was a, older Southern man, very conservative, right? So pretty much nothing in common, very different viewpoints. But during my time offshore, I just continue working on those relationships. You try to understand, why they have certain beliefs, what misconceptions they may have about you, what you have about them. And I think it's so key to build those relationships. And then, once you're working with the managers, to start to ask the why and how come, and, if this is how we've always done things, do we really need to do it this way? And just, I think like Hannah mentioned, you really need to be that voice. I think in a company culture is really defined by its people. And if you hire the same type of people and the same type of people apply for those companies, then it's not going to change. And just as much as Hannah mentioned, we need diversity of, race and color and gender, I think we also just need a diversity of opinions as well. And I think a lot of companies have recognized that, what the future looks like, and they're definitely starting to hire more people that have broader viewpoints. I will say a company like Exxon, and I'm just speaking on my own experience, but as we've seen, I think though, fossil fuels are still going to be in play, at least for the next, 20, 30 years or so, especially in a lot of these developing countries. So really the question becomes, well, then how do we make that more sustainable in and of itself? And a lot of the work that I've done as an environmental engineer for the company is working on improving our current operations and going above and beyond just like, the bare compliance to implementing some of those projects. So we have worked on major carbon capture and storage, implementing those at our facilities, reducing methane, upgrading our machinery, reducing our diesel consumption, and just thinking about ways that, what we have and how do you change that. So, and I think that's, it's been really interesting. It's been fascinating getting that opportunity and just seeing sort of all points of the energy world there.
I appreciate that and your perspective, Miriam. Thank you. And then Jimmy, I know you mentioned something yesterday on the engineering for the environment panel, but when we hear about NREL, we know the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, but tell us a little bit more about who you work with on a daily basis, and maybe that I think can piggyback off a little bit more about what Miriam was just saying as well.
Yeah, so my main client or project partner is the Department of Defense, and you would typically never think of them as being like the large tree huggers that we all are. But every time I go to a military installation and talk to the energy managers and the electrical engineers, they're looking to deploy more renewables on the installation. And there was the 1 gigawatt goal from President Obama in 2011 to deploy 1 gigawatt of renewable energy on US military bases. The other one is just NREL as a whole. I won't be able to pick out specific partners, but there's been partners like ExxonMobil, BP, Niagara Bottling. They produce all the water bottles for like Costco and Walmart. They've all come and just try to find ways like, how can we have a positive impact? And that's usually part of like marketing campaigns, is they advertise that, but they're actually doing it too. It's no one's out there trying to have a negative impact. How do we make this better, right? Clean coal. Coal's inherently not good, but there is a way to clean it up and make it a little bit better. So it's pretty interesting, just the people that come into NREL and the organizations that come into NREL and the great positive impact that they want to make. And I think, like Miriam mentioned, going in and being an infiltrator and trying to change your organization from the ground up, that's how we sort of change the world, right? You just be that squeaky wheel with a good idea and keep pushing it.
Yes, love this. So Hannah, I'm going to bounce this one to you. When we talked earlier, you talked to me a little bit more about this concept of the bleeding edge, and you and your role in your organization at IPS always being on the bleeding edge. So one, tell us a little bit more about what that means to you. And again, we're talking about the context of the future of energy. And then, what are the risks and rewards involved with being on the bleeding edge of energy?
Yeah, so something I find a lot in the industry is we're all just kind of pretending we've got all of this figured out every single time. And the truth is, anytime you're doing any kind of engineering, sometimes you're you're doing something for the first time. And that's definitely true for my work at IPS. We're constantly finding ourselves on the bleeding edge, recreating something new, trying to get creative for a client. And it's uncomfortable for both us and our clients, but it's rewarding because every bleeding edge project, you know, it's a steep learning curve. And we get better at replicating that project and then doing it at a larger scale. So it's you know, learning curve is always a cost to a company, so it's worth refining the craft and capitalizing on that cost for future projects. But you know, we've emphasized a lot on this panel that the technology is there, but sometimes it's not. The truth is that, like, before I started the company, we did a lot of energy storage, but it was a lot of, you know, like off-grid homes, which is pretty straightforward. And we weren't doing energy storage at the same scale either. So now with like the research I've done and the time, you know, me and my team, we've spent going after these energy storage projects, the demand from customers, just more engagement from our engineering team on energy storage. We're going after larger and more challenging projects, and it puts us in an advantageous position over our competitors. But it's we're sometimes figuring things out for the first time, to be honest. We know a lot about the technology, so we're able to be consultative with clients and tell them why you know, another technology is maybe not what they're looking for, or not going to work how they're being told it works. So I hear other companies, you know, who very obviously haven't figured things out sometimes, and you know, but our experience really puts us ahead of those competitors. And you know, our experience with testing and knowing which technologies are the most safe, I think that you know, the bleeding edge projects we've done, it's really paid off for those situations.
That's great, thank you. Zach, you work a lot, I mean, you work with all the innovators in clean tech, a lot of them at least, and helping them make their visions come true for the future of clean tech or energy. So talk to us a little bit about, you know, what are the risks that they face, people who are being innovative and the people on the call who have ideas and they want to get their ideas out there. Can you shed some light on what that process has been looking like for innovators in the clean tech field?
Yeah, so again, like my work is centered around leveraging public grants and for clean tech startups, and then getting that into a deployable project, which can then be replicated at scale. So the risks involved, I mean, clean tech startups inherently, if you're engineering a hardware product, that's risky and expensive to fund. And like in a world where a dog walking startup is valued at $1 billion, like it's tough to trek through all the venture money that's out there. So for us, bringing a clean tech startup to success might look like, I guess, for example, we worked with a startup that takes used electric vehicle batteries and repurposes them into big energy storage units. And so they were just a concept out of Davis, UC Davis, in a lab. And we've been working with them to write a grant for the California Energy Commission to deploy their prototype recycled energy storage unit on at a grocery store up here in Sacramento. And essentially what that would then lead to is leveraging the public funds to demonstrate the technology validation. We would then bring in a corporate partner that would be interested in doing more of these. And essentially then that kind of lifts the clean tech startup from seed stage idea to, you know, commercial, and then hopefully they can scale from there. I guess that's kind of what that process looks like.
Got it, thank you. What do early adopters look like? Hannah, we had an interesting call about this as well in terms of what you see at IPS and some of your favorite early adopters. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so some of my favorite projects are, you know, those were the ones that were hardest to get off the ground. So, you know, in my experience, anyone can sell someone solar who's environmentally motivated. You know, they have a big budget to go solar. That's super easy. But I love trying to, make it pencil for the other end of the spectrum. And these are the people, that we need to impact the most. And that's a word I like that everyone's using, because I think like people like Miriam and, people who are kind of on the front lines of change, those are creating the most impact. And that's true with my work with these customers as well, because, solar and renewables, they can be a great investment for anyone. And those have been my favorite projects because they're the most challenging. The customer is not doing it for environmental reasons. And those projects are proof that renewables can pencil really well.
Explain to us what pencil means.
Yeah, so that means just like financially work for your investment. So most of my clients have, investment goals, certain ROIs, IRRs that they have to meet. So like in Massachusetts, the typical return on solar is only like 3 years. So
that's great. Thank you. And then if any of the other panelists have something to add to that element of early adopters, who are they? What do they look like? And maybe they aren't, are they, or are they not what you picture?
I'll add in and sort of connect one of the questions that was in the chat, but what's the biggest hurdle you commonly see for these proven technologies? And the craziest thing being an engineer working on this is the challenges aren't technical challenges, right? We all can figure that stuff out. It's cost and political and bureaucracy. So usually we're not coming up with one solution to answer a question. We're coming up with multiple solutions to answer a question, and then someone picks the one that makes the most either economic sense or like resilient sense is what we work in a lot for DoD. Like, how can it make you survive for an extended outage and things like that with Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Katrina. But yeah, a lot of the cutting edge, the early adopters, they do see a lot of challenges, and they're the ones, serial number one always experiences the most challenges. So that's why like a lot of organizations have demonstration dollars just to fund things like this, even though they might, like Hannah mentioned, they might not pencil out, but someone has to demonstrate it. So someone's always willing to be that first person. Maybe it works out perfect and you get a perfect system, but usually there's a lot of bugs that need to be worked out.
Thanks, Jimmy. I will pull in a question now from the audience, which I think is a great one. What do you think is the single most important thing in increasing the share of renewable energy on the market and moving away from fossil fuels more quickly? Put you guys on the spot.
I'll jump in if that's cool. I'm not sure this is the most important one, but I guess one of the trends that are really driving like the feasibility of renewables is just corporate procurement of renewables, and that's companies like Facebook, Google, and Apple just building and buying out huge wind farms, solar farms to power their data centers, and those kind of seem to be one of the biggest drivers of bringing the price down, deploying them at scale. So I'd say that's something to watch out for, is how all these big companies are transitioning to renewables.
Something I see working with those big companies is, again, the financial incentives that are available. And as most of us know, we really, as a country, we bolster the fossil fuel industry quite a bit. But what we need to do is talk to our utilities, talk to legislators about what policies can we enact to support renewable energy. And something that's done in Massachusetts, where I work, is the utility has figured out a way to really profit off of them by giving out money just to install solar and even energy storage. And there are really innovative programs in Massachusetts to support them, and it's made Massachusetts, reach their climate goals that much faster. So we have to elect people with a clean energy strategy, and then we also have to make utilities aware of how they can profit from solar, and then also by extension corporate entities, how they can profit from solar and renewables.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Jimmy or Miriam, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's a great point to make, though. But I think if you look at maybe some of the developing nations and what their immediate energy needs are, if the question is, can renewables keep up with that upcoming demand? And I don't know if we have, ideally we would have the capacity and the distribution and the storage and all these other technological challenges figured out in areas that don't currently have the infrastructure, and that might be cost prohibitive at the moment. So I think it'll be really interesting space to watch. Places like Massachusetts, I think it can obviously be a leader, but places in the developing world that might not have those resources, how are they going to adopt? They'll probably be lagging a little bit because they just don't have those resources available.
Right.
I think if we figure it out first and drive the cost down from just supply and demand, I think that would start like a worldwide reach.
Yeah, and the conversation about like developing countries, there's I think it's Department of Energy, Federal Energy Management Program dollars that go towards Power Africa every year. And what they were investigating is how do we get power to rural communities in Africa, and the logical decision because of cost and just other like getting diesel and other things like that to power a diesel generator to these communities. The best idea was definitely just to bring in a bunch of like solar panels and batteries and have like 480 volt distribution systems covering 30 to 40 homes. And that's sort of a cleaner option than what we're doing right now. It's sort of rudimentary, but it works for those environments and what they need. So it brings lights and like minimal refrigeration and things like that to a community that had nothing like that. So they're starting ahead of us, sort of.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about a lot of developing countries that are leapfrogging and just completely skipping over what we saw as our industrial revolution and jumping right into renewables as well, because the cost has become more feasible over the years. So it is interesting to see how different countries and communities are evolving towards that too. So thank you guys for your feedback on that question. We have a lot of amazing questions, so I'm going to try to get to them in a little bit. I do have a few more questions on our radar before we jump back into audience Q&A. But we do have a lot of participants on the call who are maybe looking to get involved into the industry or being a change maker like yourselves and getting involved into the field and that workforce when they get out of school or whenever they want to pivot as a career. Could you share some examples of things that you've done in your own personal career or journey, academic journey, that have helped you gain the skills you needed to be where you are now? And Zach, why don't we start with you?
Specifically the skills needed, or just how to get into this place?
I think a little bit of both. If you could shed some light of,
Okay.
the skills that you found necessary and maybe how you were able to gain them.
Yeah, I would say to get into the field, you have to really claw at every networking opportunity that comes your way. And I think the way to approach this is not to think, I'm not used to networking when I was young. I was like, oh, networking, this kind of seems like, I don't know, a little out there, cringe. But if you go into every networking opportunity with the idea that this could blossom into something, eventually it will. I don't know, I worked at a deli over a summer, and because I didn't get an internship, and there'd be solar employees that would come in, I'd write my information down and hand it to them. I was like, please give me an interview or something. I ended up getting those too, but I think that mentality kind of carried over the years to just claw at every networking opportunity. And I would say, just if you're into energy, read green tech media. If you're an undergrad, just read up on that. It's the best way you can become an expert, not an expert, but educate on the topic, and of course work hard in school, and just network, talk to people, listen to podcasts. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Miriam, do you have anything?
Yeah, definitely. To what Zach said, I think, number one, I guess do your homework, build that strong technical foundation, get those core engineering skills or, science skills if that's your area. But then also I would say it's very important to be well-rounded, especially as companies look to who their next leaders are. You need to, know your technical knowledge, but then also you need to know the business side of things, as many of us have talked about. An economic incentive, I think it drives a lot of this change. So supplement some business classes, get really good at communicating. A lot of engineers are smart, but not a lot of them can write really well or speak really well. So just being able to convey your ideas clearly and be persuasive, especially if you're and you hire an employee and you're trying to convince a big company to implement a sustainability program, why would they listen to me? So just making, developing good talking points and trying to just be a good communicator, I think is key. And I think you can learn that with a lot of different ways in college, different organizations that you can lead, and different groups to get going with the green program, being a leader there. That's always a great example. So, and then just find something that you're passionate about. I think there's something suited to everyone's personality type and everyone's strength. If you want to be in policy and you want to be in activism, I think that's great. If, I'm more analytical, I liked more the day-to-day engineering work and having tangible results. So, I went into engineering. Again, I think don't only look for sustainable, companies in their title. Places where I work, you wouldn't immediately think that, but that's exactly where we need more of you guys to come work with. So I think you just keep an open mind and really look for every opportunity. And even if it's not there right off the start, as you grow in your career and you move it up into those higher level positions, then you still have an ability to influence.
Great, thank you. Jimmy, what about you?
Yeah, I think that two of the bigger points made so far were networking and communication, right? If you don't know what jobs are out there, start asking around, build a network, look around on LinkedIn, look at job descriptions, job postings, even if you're not in the job market, see where your goal should be to get to. And if that job doesn't exist, there's always the opportunity to try to reach out to someone and say, I think you should have a position like this. I'm sure 30 years ago, there was not a sustainability engineer person at ExxonMobil. That there's probably massive teams now. But yeah, and communication, like Miriam mentioned as well, I became an engineer because I did not like writing, and now I'm published.
Do a lot of writing, yeah.
Yeah. I'm published in a number of reports that it's always kind of interesting, but if you can't communicate the ideas that you have, no one will ever hear them. So sort of being well-rounded, like was mentioned, and being able to convey that information to a wide audience or just the right audience is pretty important. So yeah, networking, communication, and the other point that Miriam mentioned is don't type in energy engineer or environmental engineer in job postings. Look for that environmental law to get into public utility commissions to change the trends within the commission. Look for that sort of niche thing where you think you might fit.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. And what about you, Hannah?
Yeah, so I stalked people to work at my company. So I wouldn't recommend that for the legality of it, but yeah, I was working a job I really didn't like, and I was at a networking event for that job, and I met someone who worked at IPS there, and went back to the office with them to meet more people at IPS, and that's how I got involved with them. So that's a little, I wouldn't recommend that, but the principle behind it is that you need to just be super diligent. And I like the word Miriam used, to just claw at every opportunity, because you won't get anywhere in life if you aren't just chasing your goals with everything that you have. And that's kind of where I've ended up where I am. Another thing I want to emphasize that's already been said is just taking a super interdisciplinary approach to your education. That's something that I started when I did the green program. I realized how many skills I needed to have to just be involved in energy. It's not just engineering. It's not just the tech stuff. It's policy. It's math. It's it's financials. A lot of different things. So take every single class that you can. In my master's program was a lot like the green program, in that it was, a very interdisciplinary approach. I was running all over campus, from the Lead School of Business, the MBA program, to engineering classes, to environmental classes. I just took everything that I could and soaked up all the knowledge that I could, and it has definitely paid off.
Thanks, Hannah. I do want to touch on one comment that just came in through the chat. Ashwani, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a huge starting point. It is a massive starting point. It's the reason why we're all here, right? And Ashwani's talking a little bit more about the 1.5 degrees of where we are now until our 2-degree capacity of disaster. And we're already seeing that around the world. So to just zoom back out, and I'm glad Ashwani brought that up, is, we're all here because of this. We know this, and we're definitely all on the same page. So we're looking forward to having this panel talk a little bit more about what we're doing to move forward and what actions we can take, and a lot of the students on the call too being able to walk away with something to be able to do. So on that note, that is very important to us. What is one action step that anybody on this call, off this call, can do right now to help mobilize change for a sustainable future starting this Earth Day on the 50th anniversary? Miriam, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think something that's important is to always, look at the, like, what else and what's next, even within your job description. So when I first started, this was your job description, what you had to do. But I really looked for, like, well, what else can we do? I know as a company, we can do better. So I looked at different projects that we could do, went to the managers, I asked, please give me money for this project, and here's the reasons why, this is why we should do it. So I just think, just take the extra step. Do your job well, but then look at what else, you can do that the company might not necessarily have thought of already.
That's great. Do you have an example maybe of a project that you've been working on specifically? It doesn't have to be like recent, but it's a project that you've worked on that has helped move that needle.
Yeah, I can give a couple of examples. There's an initiative we did to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions on some of our facilities. So we did some, leak detection surveys, and then we replaced some natural gas controllers with compressed air controllers, I would say. But that one, and it made sense, and we did it because the emissions that we were venting, we could actually then, sell as gas, and that pays for itself. So that was a cool project. One of the ones I want to touch on that everyone on this call seems very basic is, starting a recycling program at some of our facilities. A lot of these big plants have big warehouses and tons of cardboards that comes through, and we were not recycling them. When I got there, I'm like, are you kidding me? This is so simple. So we got in touch with a recycling company, and we tried to make it economical. We realized, well, we're not paying landfill fees. We could actually, recycle it, and the recycling company was able to cut a deal with us. So I mean, that was just something so simple, but besides just, that having a good change, I think what it really did was start to shift the mindset of all the operators that worked at that facility. So now that they recycle at the facility, they can then go home to their families and start recycling in their communities, and just have that little bit of a mind shift change. So I thought that was a cool program. Again, something simple, something that we might think is obvious, but that really started to change that culture that I think is most important.
That's great. And that's a huge step for a company or culture that isn't or hasn't been thinking about that for decades. So kudos to you for, moving those needles a little bit more, given a completely different ecosystem. And I do think it's really brave for people and environmentalists to be stepping into worlds that are completely different from them. So again, thanks for being here and sharing your perspective and sticking your neck out on the line for the environmentalists of the world too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that. Zach and Jimmy, do you have anything to add to that as well in terms of, anything to bounce off of what Miriam was just saying?
Yeah, I would say lobby your state representatives and your energy commission to invest in energy entrepreneurs. Here in California, we have a program that we work on. It's called the Cal Seed program. And every year, it's about a $25 million program that invests in about 20 clean energy entrepreneurs every year, gives them each a $150,000 check, entrepreneur support. And those checks can be used to validate projects, invest in R&D, or help bridge financing rounds. So I'm personally a big believer in what American entrepreneurs can do and can bring some breakthrough clean energy ideas to the grid. So I'd say if you're in California, tell your state's people representatives, support us, CalSeed. I know New York has a program called NYSERDA, and if you don't see that your energy commission is doing a program like that, I would lobby them to support programs like that.
Thanks, Zach. Jimmy.
Yeah, and like Zach mentioned, so vote, right? It's all in politics, so make sure you're either lobbying your local representatives or just getting out there and voting. But I'm sure everybody on here is doing that or will be doing that. because we've been talking about it, and the challenges aren't technical. We want to demonstrate it to make the case to all of the people that need to help finance, fund, and develop renewable portfolio standards to do these sort of things, or develop recycling programs, but bring costs down so that you can do that. But it's all sort of bubbling up to a political discussion. It's either a political or a dollar signs discussion, and we can have our impact on our representatives through voting and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you. I love all of those points. If any of the participants watching have any other points that have not been added or said, please jump in there. I see Katie jumping in, reducing your meat and animal product consumption. I love it. Even if it's a reducitarian, flexitarian lifestyle, do it. It makes a difference. I think one of the biggest challenges that we deal with, at least I know a lot of students, alumni, I just read a student application who admittedly they were so brave in just being able to say, like, listen, I've been scared to try to do something and not make enough of an impact. And I don't know what I need to do to help. And where we come from is a world of something is better than nothing. So if it is just reducing your meat once a week to start, that is something you're contributing. So we need to start taking those steps. And again, our whole theme is mobilizing change and taking action here. Another thing that I wanted to touch on, and then we'll jump on to questions from the panel, is what are trends that you're all really excited about when we're talking about the future of energy? What does that look like? Is it things you're already working on? What are the things that are happening in your world that maybe we should keep an eye on as well? Jimmy, why don't you start?
I'll stay in my stovepipe since that's all I can really speak intelligently about, but it's definitely on the control side. So like demonstrating some of the capabilities of inverter-based controls for solar PV, wind, batteries. That's all pretty exciting to me, and I think in the next 10 years there's about to be some pretty cool things coming out of those technologies. And yeah, that's pretty short and sweet.
Great, thank you. Hannah.
Yeah, I have to say batteries too. They're absolutely going to change the world of energy and our world, period. They solve so many problems from residential to utility scale technology. If we can store solar energy, then we no longer need peaker plants, which will really reduce the amount of natural gas we need. And then at that point, yeah, we would be able to reach that point of 100% renewables really easy. There's still ways to go though. We need to make them safer, and like Jim mentioned, the controls piece is something we need to get better at as well.
Great. Zach?
I'd say maybe not trends, but I guess my trends would be those 4 Ds. And I guess I would just want to say to this, just like the breadth of the entrepreneurs in the clean tech ecosystem is really amazing. I mean, you have people that are building robots that build solar power plants that come up more quickly and cost effectively, artificial intelligence applications that can quickly determine the most cost effective sites for solar power plants, drones that are monitoring the performance of solar plants to determine which are underperforming so asset owners can quickly fix it. And then you have software applications for buildings to manage their energy efficiency, in turn like saving 30% of the energy bill, and that of course helps the bottom line. So yeah, I'm personally just really fascinated by what American entrepreneurs are doing.
Awesome. And Miriam?
Yeah, I think one of the cool projects that's coming up that I had the chance on working on last year on one of them is the carbon capture and storage projects. I know in the energy industry, when you produce oil and gas, carbon dioxide is a natural byproduct. And before, I don't think there was a lot of management of that. But one of the projects I worked on, and what Jimmy mentioned, it was sort of the right policies were put into place, along with the advanced technology that was required in order to drill a very complex injection well. The site had the right geology that was suitable for long-term CO2 storage, and then all those things together provided the right business incentive to do that project. So that project is saving millions of tons of CO2 a year. That's currently being worked. So I think what Jimmy mentioned is key. The perfect storm has to come together: policy, technology, and business, and then sustainability. I think that's key. And there's definitely some projects that I think are going to hit all three.
Great, thank you all for your perspective on that. So we had a ton of questions come throughout the whole session. We do have 5 minutes left, so we're going to try to keep this concise to get to as many as we can. One question that came in that is very relevant to right now is how you all see the current oil prices plummeting, and how right now in terms of COVID, and how do you see that impacting the future or playing a role in the future of energy? And Miriam, maybe we can start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think obviously right now, I don't know, yesterday oil prices were negative, but again, I think to my first comment, I think it's important to look at long-term energy trends and what's driving that demand, and that's going to be things like, you know, economic growth, population growth. Those are sort of the key long-term drivers. There's always short-term volatility with oil prices going up and down, you know. So I think while it's obviously having a short-term impact right now, I think eventually it'll balance out, and then I think it's just important to sort of look at the end game.
Do we think that this is an opportunity for renewables, or the more sustainability side of the spectrum for the situation right now with oil prices going down?
Oil prices I think are going down, and really in large because the demand's going down because of COVID, right? So it's, you know, the demand's not there for oil in the transportation sector. The demand's not there for electricity to run all the manufacturing facilities. So, you know, the oil demand's down. I also think then the overall electricity demand's down. I don't think that overcomes a lot of the technology challenges that we talked about at the beginning just yet.
Okay, thank you. And does anybody else have anything to add to that question?
I'll add just the interest we're getting from our clients right now. We're getting a larger interest in battery storage, and that tends to happen anytime disasters happen in the world, like hurricanes or anything like that. But companies are just looking for more resiliency. So I'm definitely seeing it as an opportunity to have more projects out there right now. COVID.
Great. And just to head to another question, well, with the few minutes we have left, one perspective that we don't have on this call right now is nuclear, and we should have that perspective on this call right now. And I'm already, like, my Rolodex of all of our nuclear engineers from the Green Program is coming to mind. We'll have them on another one. But how, in terms of your capacities at your roles at work, how do you each foresee the role of nuclear energy? Do you think we need it? Do you think it's a bridge fuel? How do you see the future of nuclear playing into your worlds?
I don't know if it really plays into my world directly. I did grow up in New York, actually not far from the Indian Point nuclear power plant that supplies quite a bit of energy to New York City. I think, though, nuclear obviously has a bad public connotation with, you know, things like Chernobyl, Fukushima, things. So it has a lot of potential, and I think Bill Gates actually has a cool TED talk about modularizing nuclear. So I'm excited about that. I'm not in that industry, but I think that's definitely something that should be looked at as well.
Great. Does anybody have anything else to add?
I definitely agree with that. I don't think you should rule nuclear out. I work at the National Renewable Energy Lab. Anytime I collaborate with people from Sandia National Labs, Idaho National Lab, both are very heavy nuclear arms of the Department of Energy's research in nuclear, and they list off a whole line of things on why a lot of the perception is not accurate. And there are a lot of challenges, but just like any other technology, there's challenges that need to be addressed or considered. And there's ways around that. So, I do think it is a viable option of the future, but I'm not the expert in that, like most of us, but the experts that I would turn to would say that it's a viable option. So I'm not against it in any way.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to that. I'm not an expert on nuclear at all, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think nuclear provides 36% of America's carbon-free power. So I'm not on board with shutting down what's out there already, because that'd kill a whole lot of progress. But I think it's just worth noting.
Great, thank you. Hannah, did you have anything?
Not really. I don't know a whole lot about nuclear to add.
Cool. No, I respect that you're just like, nah, I'm good. All right, guys, so we're just about to wrap up. I do want to thank everybody who's joined the call. Thank you so much for participating in the conversation. I love all the perspectives that have been here. There have been no wrong answers. So I really appreciate everyone being open-minded, listening, adding your thoughts and feedback. Please, if you're interested in learning more about the Green Program, join us on our upcoming, we have a few other panels this week for Earth Week. So head on to that website. We'll drop that link below in the chat bar. It's a few other ones coming up, like consulting for climate change. We have food security coming up as well. So we have a few good ones for you all. And also, of course, the Green Program, we are seeking future sustainability leaders like these ones that you're talking to today, and on all the other panels too. So if you're interested in coming on a Green Program, getting some global experience and being really immersed in what the world is doing with sustainable development challenges and solutions, we'll drop that link to learn more about the Green Program as well. But we welcome you all to join and just continue being a part of our community. But on that note, it is 4 o'clock. Happy Earth Day. I hope you all have some time to reflect and connect with our Earth today. But thank you all for joining. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Hey.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.